Welcome back, my dear ThoughtVolutionists, to yet another captivating episode where stories unfold like pages in a cherished book, revealing the strength and spirit of the human journey. My name is Stefan Dubiel, and as always, I am honored to be your host for this beautiful episode. Today, we have the privilege of journeying alongside a remarkable soul whose life was forever altered by a single moment of tragedy and the unwavering love of a furry companion. As a dog and cat papa myself, this one truly hits home. In 2015, Carmen's world was turned upside down when a careless driver shattered her reality with a devastating collision, leaving her grappling with the aftermath of a severe concussion and traumatic brain injury. For over 2 years, Carmen battled with pain, anxiety, and overwhelming sadness, until she found solace in an unexpected prescription: a dog. Enter Coconut, a four-legged angel whose arrival not only saved Carmen's life, but ignited a newfound purpose within her. From the sun-soaked shores of Honolulu to the tranquil streets of Oshkosh, Carmen's journey with Coconut became a beacon of hope, leading her to harness her lifetime of experiences and marketing expertise to support small businesses and advocate for rescue dogs. For 4 years, Carmen dedicated herself to a rescue shelter, pouring her heart into writing bios, securing grants, and organizing events, all in the name of finding forever homes for thousands of furry friends. Her passion for rescue dogs transcends the confines of the shelter walls as she tirelessly writes and speaks to raise awareness about the transformative power of canine companionship. Through her books, including I Chose You, Imperfectly Perfect Rescue Dogs and Their Human, and her forthcoming work, When Love Wags a Tail, Carmen shines a spotlight on the profound bond between humans and their four-legged companions, inspiring hope and healing in the hearts of those who need it most. Join us as we delve into Carmen's inspiring journey, a testament to the strength and spirit of the human-animal bond and the profound impact of unconditional love. Through her words and her work, Carmen reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is always light, and sometimes it comes with a wagging tail. This is ThoughtVolution, where every story is a testament to the power of the relationships, often between humans, and in this particular case, the transformative potential found within the embrace of a rescue dog. Stay with us as we embark on a journey of hope, healing, and the boundless love that truly knows no bounds. Carmen, thank you so very much for being here. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of your life and everything that you have experienced, which there's a lot, and we'll get there, can you share a favorite memory you have with Coconut, your rescue dog?
Yes, I have lots and lots of memories. And first of all, thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this since we met, and I think we're going to have a good time. I was that person who never wanted a dog, but I got a dog, and we'll describe why and how and all those things. But I did not know. I'd never heard about separation anxiety. So the very first night we got him, I had theater tickets, and I didn't want to not go. And my husband was working, so I thought, nah, what's the worst that can happen? He can poop. I'll pick that up. I have hardwood floors. Well, there was poop, but there were also the silk drapes we had negotiated with the sale of the house were gone. The curtains upstairs were gone. The shades were gone. The pantry was knocked over. He ate all the forbidden food like chocolate and macadamia nuts and destroyed everything. And he ended up in the emergency vet the next day because he fell on the stairs, sprained his leg, and could not walk. And yet I kept him. That is a memory I will never forget. I just thought it was going to be such a huge mistake. So I always tell people, if I can survive that first night and keep my dog, you can too, because nobody had as worst night the first night as I did. So I just really encourage people to understand that when you adopt, just like when you have a child, you can't give your child away. And Stefan, are there minutes that you were thinking, I don't want this kid? He won't shut up. I don't know what to do. I'm a terrible parent. Yes, you have to say yes because we all know that's true. You would never give away your child. So think carefully before you surrender your dog. And so I like to be an object lesson. So that's my memory.
That's a beautiful one. And having two goofballs here myself, I can very much relate to this. And I also remember the painstaking moments when I brought home my youngest dog, and she was still a puppy. And there were many sleepless nights. There were many moments of like, what did I get myself into? How did I not remember how it was with dog number one? And now I'm doing it again. But it definitely pays off. Now, you told me a little earlier that you are technically not a born dog person, and that you kind of slipped into this rescue dog interest because of selfish reasons. Would you
Oh,
mind
very selfish. Very.
would you mind elaborating a little bit on that?
Yeah. Backstory, I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, family of 8 kids, two-bedroom home, very, very poor. But we always had dogs. Now, some of them were, "Mom, can we keep him?" We had one dog who just wandered onto our porch, very, very old senior dog, and he slept outside on the porch, and the next morning, he was dead. He just died in his sleep. It was like, I guess he needed some place for his last stop. So, we had a lot of dogs, but I didn't like any of the dogs, and in fact, there was one named George I just out and out couldn't stand. I just hated this dog, and I don't even know what my visceral hatred of it was, but it was there. So, fast forward many, many years later when my kids are at the, "Mom, can we have a dog? Sean's dog had puppies." And I don't know, in a moment of weakness, I said yes. I now know Brutus was not a bad dog. He was the wrong dog at the wrong time for the wrong family because he was a 90-pound golden doodle with lots of energy, lots of smarts, no fence, and nobody at home. And he got into every kind of mischief you could ever possibly imagine. He was that dog that is, you remember Turner and Hooch or Me and Marley? He was that dog that just destroyed everything. Lots of funny stories now. But after that dog, I said, I'm done. I will never have a dog. And I never would have had a dog, except we were living in Hawaii at the time. Life was perfect. I'd been through all these other tragedies. Life was good. We were coming home for the beach. We were on a highway. We were at a stoplight, and we were just sitting there minding our own business. In a little Subaru, and a giant SUV slammed into us. We slammed into another SUV, 2 other cars, news at 10, 5-car pileup. The car was totaled, and I didn't know, so was I. I ended up with brain damage. I had my cell phone in my hand as a passenger. It flew up, hit me in the head, think blunt force trauma. Of course, I didn't know any of these things were wrong. I woke up the next day with a headache, and I've had a headache every day since June of 2015. For your listening audience, it's better. I used to be a level 10. I'm usually 4 or 5 now, unless something happens. But I worked and I cooked and I drove and I lived life, and it was awful. And I was incredibly suicidal. I wasn't aware in the beginning that I was. My doctor, who was just a saint, kept saying, "I think you should get a dog." And then we would do acupuncture, we would do massage, and we would do drugs, and we would do all the different modalities, and nothing helped. But he kept saying, "Get a dog." He had 2 dogs in his office. One was really old and he farted all the time. And I thought, "Oh, I can't do a dog. I can't do this." But the dogs were a calming influence for his patients. He was just a wonderful doctor, but I kept saying no. It got to the point where I saw 3 outcomes for my life. I worked as a concierge for Expedia, that little teeny tiny travel company. And what I did was I sold Aloha. I sold the luau's and the Pearl Harbors and the dolphin watches. And I made everybody's life fun and perfect while I was not fun or perfect. But I had to put up that mask. And it was such an effort that I thought I'm either going to get put in jail for assault because people can be rude when things don't go their way. I will get fired because of my mouth for the same reason, or I will kill myself. And the killing of myself seemed the best of the three options. And I used to plot. I used to Google how much of each medication should I take in which order so I die, so I'm not a vegetable. I mean, that was never far from my mind. So I realized I can't do this. My son had been to college in Wisconsin, met a girl, was an attorney, and lived here in Oshkosh. And I said, if I can't live where I want to live, which is Hawaii, I'll live where I have family. So, with virtually no research whatsoever, not knowing what I was getting into, I quit my job. Um, we left everything and we bought a house and moved to a brand new town at the ripe old age of 62. I don't recommend moving from sunny Hawaii to gloomy Wisconsin in March. That was not very good timing overall. And at some point, it was just something we'll talk about later if you want. The um, the reason, the day, the exact moment I knew I had to get a dog. So I went to a shelter and I adopted the dog that saved my life. I was telling Stefan as we were starting that I don't care who you are, what you've been through, where you're going, you need to have a purpose. My purpose was very selfish. It was, I knew I couldn't stay in my head. I had to build community. And because my background is all in sales and marketing, and this little rescue shelter was really bad at what they did. Animal wellness people are very good with animals, not so much good with marketing in general. But I'm not very good with animals, but I'm great with marketing. So I volunteered and I ended up doing the bios and the events and writing grads and rebranding them on the website and social media. And in the 4 years before COVID finally closed them down, I was able to write the bios and help find homes for 6,500 rescue dogs from Kentucky that had been transported up to Wisconsin and find them homes. And so that's my weird way into the world of dogs. I am the least likely person to have that stepped. But I tell people I'm not really a dog person. I am my dog person, my dog. But I still have a healthy fear of animals. I I've been chased. My kid's dog had a puncture wound from an attack from an unleashed dog, and he almost died. I understand the value of dogs, but I don't have that. Oh wow, look, dog, let's save the world. Let's drop everything and pet the dog. But I don't know if I'm ever gonna get there, but I'm happy I get to do what I do. So long answer, short question.
Then I don't know if you are the right person to ask this, but what role do you believe animals play in our emotional well being? And how can we foster stronger connections with them? Obviously, for you coming into this as somebody who did not consider themselves a dog person, then helped save 6,500 lives. I mean, let's just kind of let that sink in. Whether you did it through marketing, whether you came in with selfish motives, you impacted the lives of 6,500 dogs and the families who took them in an amazing way. So, what role do you think that played in your own well-being, and how can we foster stronger connections with animals?
I would not be here without my dog. I will tell you, and let me tell you the story. You know, I have never loved driving. And I didn't know it at the time, but my eye had been compromised from this wreck. The muscles holding up my right eye had dropped. And so I had no peripheral vision left. I didn't realize why I was so terrified to be on the highway. Good reason, right? Good thing I didn't kill anybody. But my husband worked in a different town in Appleton, about 25 minutes away, and we only had one car by choice. So I would quote unquote take him to work and I'd keep the car. But I was too terrified to explore. And so my days just never ended. I'd go to the movies or I'd go to a restaurant and read a book or I'd walk around. I mean, it was just a very long 9 hours or whatever it was until I was around a human being. Because remember, I didn't know anybody. And my son worked and I had, a daughter-in-law and a little grandson, but they have their lives. So to move here without knowing a human being is hard. Building community which is another whole show. But building community when you're a senior is really hard. I will tell you, I've never had to work so hard in my life. So one day in July, it was very hot, and I decided, you do take the car to work. He'd been taking it and leaving me, and the movers had done a terrible job. Everything was lost, stolen, broken. It was such a depressing start to this adventure. So I decided to walk downtown and maybe find a place for lunch. And it was super hot. I get right by the post office because I live on that same street. And I had never heard of something called EAA, which is the Experimental Aircraft Association. For 1 week in the year, Oshkosh, Wisconsin's little bitty airport is the busiest airport in the world. So people from all over the world fly in for these air shows and for the museum. And I think last year they had almost 70,000 people in 1 week. So that magnitude is huge. Well, I never heard of this place. I never heard of this thing. But what I also didn't know was they do air shows. And my migraines are often noise induced, sound induced, right? So I'm walking in the hot sun and I hear these jets overhead. I mean, I didn't know they were jets. I didn't know what it was. It was a flyover for this show. But what I heard, because my brain was so broken, and Stefan, knowing where you're from, I'm not making this up. When I heard the noise, I had a panic attack. And what I heard were Nazi planes, and I was London, and I thought I was in the Blitz. I thought I was going to be bombed. And it was so terrifying. And I stood on the sidewalk in front of the post office, sobbing and crying. Not one person stopped. They drove in, they walked in, people just avoided me. And my legs were shaking so badly that I fell to the pavement. And I sat there and I cried. And not one person stopped. No one called the police to say, hey, there's this whole crazy homeless person here or whatever. They just ignored me. And so when I could cry no more, I got up and I went home, which was maybe even not even a half a block. And I lay on the couch with the broken legs was all listening. And I just said, I can't do this. There's no reason to be alive. And I had bought these brand new knives back home because I cook. And my husband probably thought I was cooking, but I had bought the knives with the express purpose of killing myself. And much of our belongings had been lost in the move, including the box with kitchen goods. And I had no knife. And I said, people here care about dogs more than they care about people. I can't do this. I don't trust myself to be alone all day. I can't make connections. Nobody cares. So I guess I better get a dog. And that was why I got a dog. And it's a really hard story to tell. It's hard for me to remember it. I tear up every time, but that's my story. And so when you ask me, what role do animals play in the well-being of humans? Much, much, much greater role than I ever would have imagined. When I get asked this a lot, well, why did the dog make a difference? I'm not one that loves to clean up poop, right? So you got to take him out. And if you take him out, you get sunshine, which is so much better than not sunshine. We know statistics and science tell us we need that natural vitamin D. You can take all the pills you want. It's not the same. Your dog needs exercise. If you do not get your dog out moving, they're going to destroy your house. A tired dog is a good dog. So if you're walking your dog, you're walking yourself. Dogs are people magnet. And those connections that I didn't get in my neighborhood when it was just me, I had this armor that people probably saw, this sad, horrible, horrible person that didn't want those connections. All of a sudden, that you don't have a choice. What a cute dog. What kind is he? How old is he? Where'd you get him? And the conversations begin. And you don't get to lay on the couch and mourn for the life you had. You have no choice with the dog but to get up, get outside, get moving. And the more you do that, the better your well-being. So for me, and I think for most people, you can't see a dog without a well-behaved dog, a dog that has a human that follows the rules. I don't mean a pack of wild dogs, but you can't see a dog and not smile and not open up a conversation. It can't happen. I think I don't live in the most dog-friendly town. So I think having trash cans on the streets where you can actually pick up the poop and put it away would be really great, because I think that dogs get a bad rap, not so much because of the dogs, because of humans. So I think we can make things better by being responsible dog owners, by picking up after our dogs, by putting our dogs on a leash, by being respectful, by helping kids to know you don't touch a dog on a snout and you're going to get bit, by having, maybe urban dog parks so that people can come together and your dog can be off leash. I think a lot of it is just our acceptance. I don't know, that's not even the word, but when I was in Prague, and I really, Prague was amazing because everywhere I turned, there were dogs, well-behaved dogs, beautiful dogs. There was such a culture of dogs. You'd go up and down the shopping areas, and every shop had cold water out for the dogs. Some of them had dog biscuits. It was very welcoming. The dog was an extension of the person, if that makes any sense. And so in my community, yes, we do have some dog-friendly dining, and we do have a dog park. But I think there's so much more we can do. I think being responsible, get your dog spayed and neutered, get your dog with all the shots. Treat your dog like a family member and not like an item, and your dog will pay you back in spades. And thereby, when you're out there in public, your dog's a delight. And if you're on the fence about a dog, you don't understand the value of a dog. When you see a well-behaved, well-trained dog, that dog is a delight. And you're going to want that. And you're going to do the steps to make sure your dog is the kind of dog that others want to be around. I think there's many, many other ways, but I think that's where my town fails, and many towns fail, is not treating dogs like family members.
I absolutely agree. Now, in your work with rescue dogs in particular, clearly dogs that are in shelters have experienced some sort of trauma. So my question would be for you, what advice would you give to someone who's considering adopting specifically a rescue dog, especially if it's at a time that they're going through a difficult passage in their lives as well?
The first thing to remember is, honestly, most rescue dogs are not bad dogs. They're great dogs in bad situations. You have to walk in with that assumption rather than walking in and saying, these are damaged dogs. They've been through trauma. Because quite frankly, from what I've seen in the thousands of dogs I worked with or that I interacted with, and the people, a lot of them didn't have trauma. Yes, there's trauma in that they're not with the people they used to be with, or maybe they were puppies and were taken away from their mom right away and shipped somewhere. But it's not like most were not beaten, they were not abused, they were not starved. They were in a bad situation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to just be honest. Your shelter adoption person is not a mind reader. And when you lie or you omit information, it makes it hard for them to do a good match. So when you're looking for a dog, be as realistic and as honest. And I have a couple examples. We had a woman, she was, 70 or so, and she adopted a very size appropriate, age appropriate. I think the dog was like 8, lots of years left in this small dog. And small dogs are hard to get. So she got there, got her dog, left the building at about 4:30, came back at 7 o'clock on the dot, wanting to return the dog. Most shelters have a policy of no returns. Yeah, you can return your dog, and you're not getting the adoption fee back. So she was just nasty and just belligerent, the owner said. And her story was that you would have thought that a dog this old would have been trained and would not know that you don't poop in the house. She said a different, less polite word. And he goes, well, yeah, but it takes time for communication to happen. There's going to be some accidents. And she wasn't hearing any of it. She wanted a refund. She walked in there with unrealistic expectations that a dog will magically know exactly what the new owner wants. Well, the owner shelter had it. And so he said, I will give you a refund. And she goes, that's all I wanted. And he pulls out a 20 and a 5, which was far less than a $300 adoption fee. And he goes, that'll buy you a good stuffed animal, it was all you deserve. Well, that's probably not the right response. I said, Jim, you can't say that. And he goes, I was having a bad day. I go, it's 7:05. You opened at 7. But so be realistic. And then do not withhold information. We had one woman, and the question was, do you have kids? Nope, don't have any kids. I have a fenced yard, and I've always had high active dogs. And do you have any grandkids? Yeah, but they're in New York. They don't ever hardly come. And so they said, well, this dog shouldn't be around kids. And that's what we were told when we brought him in. And she goes, oh, no, not a problem, no problem. A week later, she brings the dog back. She neglected to tell us, no, she had no young children that were her children. She ran an in-home daycare center with a border collie that is nipping at the kids, trying to herd them and knocking them down the stairs. That simple answer of a question, the adoption agent had to take her at face value. Do you have kids? No. So being as honest as you can be with the adoption counselor and then being realistic. If you don't like exercise, do not get a husky. If you are a long distance runner, do not think that that little dachshund is going to meet your needs. So there's a reason why when you go in to adopt a dog, there's these seemingly intrusive questions. Just like, as a foster dad who had adopted the kids, there were probably a lot of questions on your application that seemed incredibly intrusive, or they asked them more than one way. And the reason why is they don't want that kid to have to go back into foster care. They want a great match. And that's the exact same thing with a dog. Nothing ever made us sadder than a dog that would come back when they'd already lost their home and then come back again. The other thing is, have you ever heard of the rule of 3?
No, what's that?
So the rule of 3 goes like this. The dog you get today is a different dog than it will be in 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. The first 3 days, they're decompressing. They could be shut down. They don't necessarily seem to love you. Maybe they're not going to eat. Maybe they don't sleep. Because imagine if you had been on a truck and had just had a neuter surgery and all these shots, and you're in a new location and you're in a kennel and everybody's barking and the noise, and how would you feel? Obviously, you'd feel like that dog. The next 3 weeks are the times when they start to go, I'm getting food when I used to have to fight for it. Or, wow, I'm not getting yelled at. Or, I love touch. They're learning this is their home. But in those 3 weeks, they're still going to revert back to type. Because when we change, when we get married, there's part of our singleness still with us. And let's go back to you, when you took foster kids in, they didn't become magic kids, right away.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe they cried, or maybe they threw tantrums, or they were destructive. And the next week, maybe it got less and less. So for those 3 weeks, you're getting to know each other. And then by month 3, they know it is their home. Like, I didn't know my dog could bark until month 3. I actually thought maybe he was a injury. He had his vocals cut because he never barked. Now, he's still a very quiet dog because you can hear he's in here and he's very quiet. But I don't think he felt comfortable to bark until he felt like it was his home. And then he barked. I went, wow, he's a bark. So 3, 3, 3, the rule of 3, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. And don't have unrealistic expectations of what your dog is. And remember, a dog is not a dog is not a dog. They all come like human beings with personalities and quirks and baggage and experience. So even if you always had a husky, always had a shepherd, always had a chihuahua, it doesn't mean getting that exact same breed or breed mix will guarantee you the exact same personality, just because that's the way it is with people and with dogs.
Very, very interesting. I never thought about it like that, especially, kind of reverting back to my kids and to my dogs, because Gizmo's my second Chihuahua and he's completely different personality wise compared to my first Chihuahua that I had. So I couldn't agree with you more. Now,
but people don't think of that. They just go in and they say, I want a dog because, and they don't think it through. So you listen to your adoption counselor. That was the smartest thing I did. When we went in, my husband, who was a dog person, I jokingly say to him, "Aren't you glad I got brain damage so you can finally get a dog?" Because it wasn't happening. And I think a smart part of him was like, "Yep." But no, but he had an idea, and we looked at the computer, and there are all these dogs, and he came up with the ones. He wanted a girl. He wanted a big. He had all of these ones. So they put us in a room where we'd meet the dogs, and the dogs all went to him, and they treated me like I didn't exist. And I said to the owner, I said, "If it's my emotional support dog, shouldn't the dog come to me? Shouldn't he care about me?" And they agreed. And so Jim said, "Well, tell me what you want in a dog." I said, "I want a dog that doesn't jump, that doesn't lick, that doesn't bark, that doesn't get on furniture, and it's not annoying. That's what I want in a dog." And he goes, "You don't really want a dog, right?" I go, "Nope." And he said, "Wait, I have the perfect dog." And he came in with this little dog, little brown dog with a black tail, just nondescript. He's not one of those flashy dogs with the beautiful eyes and the special coat. I mean, he's just a dog. And he was about 12 pounds underweight at the time. So he did not look like the prize catch that I know he is. And that dog ignored those two men and he came right to me. He sat, he stared at me like, "I dare you to not love me." And so he chose me. I don't know why. Me, I think he sensed that I needed him. But that dog was in no way the dog that we came in to get or that we ever anticipated. Nor was I going to get a dog that day, which is why that nighttime horrible thing happened because I wasn't getting a dog that day. So I was not prepared. We didn't have anything. And we should never have taken that dog that day. But we did. And it's a great story now. So I got the dog I needed, exactly what I needed.
I think that's wonderful because it also circles back to what you said earlier about going in with selfish motives, right? You went there, or your husband went there rather, with this idea of what he felt he wanted, this little checklist. And then you walked out with more than the complete opposite of, I think, what either of you would have envisioned walking into that shelter. And yeah, you recovered from that selfish motive very quickly, I would say.
Well, and it goes back to listening to the adoption counselor. And interestingly enough, this dog had been at the shelter for 3 weeks and nobody asked to see him, which I find interesting because he was small enough to fit into into the places, apartment complexes and stuff that say
Mm.
no dogs over 35 pounds or 30 pounds. And so those dogs get snapped up real fast because it is hard to find those smaller dogs. And he was not a breed mix. Like there's certain breed mixes that insurance won't let you have a pit mix or maybe a German Shepherd, or there's certain dogs that you just can't have because of the insurance. And so I thought it was interesting now that I know so much that this dog really was waiting for me because he should have been adopted over and over again, if nothing more than his size. And that he was, yeah. So he was obviously my dog, but we listened. And I think that is the big key is that when Jim knew these dogs, because these adoption counselors, I mean, there's a couple different kinds of rescues. Where I helped with was a brick and mortar, which means the dogs lived there and there was staff. And so they got to know the dogs and their personalities and likes and dislikes. And whereas if the dog goes straight into foster care and then is matched with the person, because there's no building, that foster parent also knows that dog. And so either if it's foster or if it's brick and mortar, listen to the people helping you. They actually know these dogs. Unless the dog has been there for a day or 2 days, which happened quite a bit. But in general, they know them. And where they came from in Kentucky, the new place I help is from Alabama. Those people pass on notes about the dogs too. And the owners who surrender the dogs, if it's that situation, they know the dogs. So honestly, just listen and keep your mouth shut and listen. And you'll learn a
And
lot.
be truthful to yourself.
Oh God, be truthful.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of times people have this want, right? They walk in, they see a dog, they think kind of matches that picture in their minds. So they will do anything in their power to get that dog. And like you said, they'll lie on the application. They'll say whatever they believe the person might want to hear because they've got their mind made up. but they're not really thinking about the consequences, and that this is a living being that you're bringing
Yeah,
in. This is not a hat that you can then put in your closet and you're like, well, I bought this, but I don't really like it anymore. This is,
right, exactly.
and the dog lives, I mean, my Chihuahua is 17 now. I mean,
Right. That's
yeah.
right. And I said to Jim after the night of horrors and when I got to know him more, I said, "How on earth did you let me take a dog home that night?" We talked about the fact that my husband had to go to work. I was, what on earth? And he said, "We had just gotten a transport. We had so many dogs. I was afraid that if I said come back, you wouldn't." And he goes, "But I could just sense that you were a good person. I knew it was going to work." But so, I think part of it was joking, part was honest, but really with shelters being so overrun with dogs, sometimes if you're insistent and you talk a good story, they will let you adopt this dog because they need the room for some other dog.
Mm.
Because when you adopt a dog, you open up that slot for the next dog coming in. We had 2 dogs that I wrote about in my last book, and, Rusty was there for 2 years, and Pepper was there for 18 months, and they were both really high energy, and they kept getting adopted, and then it was too much, and then they'd come back, and they became the best friends, and luckily, 2 young men that lived on large properties next to each other both came in and adopted one of the dogs, and it was perfect. But I don't remember what I call it. Was I actually calculated the number of hours in 36 months, and that was the number of hours it took, or days, number of days. But the average adoption at the shelter where I was no more than 5 days. So I did a calculation in my first book, and I don't remember what it was, but how many dogs didn't get placed? They didn't have an opportunity to come to Wisconsin because those 2 dogs kept that space. And when you think of it that way, it's no wonder that some adoption agencies or shelters say, "Yeah, take it," because there's always more dogs that need a place. And there's a good chance it will work. Like in my case, it worked, but you don't know that. So yeah, a
True.
lot of stories.
True. Can you share a story from your volunteering days at the shelter that deeply touched your heart, something that just still resonates with you?
Oh, it's a bad story, but it's a story. Well, there's 2, and I tell these stories a lot. I didn't work in the shelter because I don't do dogs, and I have headaches, and I could never be around barking. So I worked from home, and I brought my dog to daycare because the business model for this little company was if we do daycare and grooming and boarding, those are fee for service income, which helps us to then take that money to pay rent, utilities, and staff. So it was a really important part of how they operated. And when COVID shut everybody down, then the income ended, and that was awful. There was just no money. And so that was just a terrible start to the end. But I would be at the shelter quite often to drop my dog off or pick him up. And one day I was in picking him up, and there was a mom and a dad and 2 kids, and they were sobbing and they were saying goodbye to their dog. And it was a beautiful, very large dog. And you could tell that this dog was their family. And it was so hard being in the room with these strangers that are trying to surrender a dog. And so I said, I don't, can you tell me why? Obviously, you love this dog. Why are you giving your dog away? And my husband said, "I lost my job. I've done everything possible to find a job, and it just isn't happening. And we just can't afford to feed our dog because the dog was probably at least 80 pounds. And I don't want to feed my dog table scraps or really cheap food. And so we think that he should be, and we can't do the vet care and things. So we think the dog should be with a family that can afford the dog." And my heart just so hard. And I said, "Well, that's a super easy problem. Why don't we feed your dog until you get a job? We will feed your dog till your dog dies if you want. I don't care how many years." Now, I didn't have any authority to say that, to make that promise, but they took that dog home. And I called the owner and I said, "Hey, Jim, I kind of did a thing." And I told him, and he goes, "Oh, that's fine." I said, "Well, I'm going to do something else. I think we should start a pet food pantry. And we should get food from stores and donations and people. And we're going to set up, and I call it the Rough Times Food Pantry, RUFF. And any dog, no questions asked, no paperwork, no anything. You just come in and say, my dog is hungry. We fed those dogs tens of thousands of pounds of food and kept dogs with people. And I was so sad when we closed because there's no food pantry now. We did for dogs and cats, even though we didn't adopt our cats. So that was one story that I'm just so happy I did. And then I know the moment when Jim decided I can't do this anymore. You know, running a rescue when you have 1,000, 1,200, or whatever it is, dogs a year, and you have staff that have to get paid, and you have all those costs, and you have just it's hard work, but it takes money. And in COVID, when people lost their jobs or people weren't working and people had the pandemic puppies and people just got nasty, it was really a very hard time for shelters and a hard time for dogs. And we were that little engine that could, and we limped along. But I know it was never far from his brain. I'm not going to make it. But he kept trying. And I went in to pick up Coconut one day, and he was in there with this family. And this time there were 3 dogs and 3 kids. And they were trying to surrender these 3 family members. And the sobbing and the crying, and it was awful. And this guy said, we lived in our rental home for 12 years. We improved this home. We thought we were living here forever. We were raising our kids here. Our kids were born here. And because the prices of real estate started skyrocketing, his owner sold the house. You can't fault the owner. You can make easy money. But the new owner decided no pets allowed. So going from a place where they thought they had a forever home to losing the only home that their 2-legged and 4-legged kids had, and they searched and they searched. They only had 60 days to get out. And they said, we have to decide, will we be homeless in our car with our dogs, or will we find a place for our kids? We can't do both. And I looked at Jim's face, and I knew we were going to close. That was the moment his heart broke. And there wasn't enough duct tape. There wasn't enough money. There wasn't enough for this man to keep hearing these stories. There were so many surrendered dogs, not because they were beat, not because they were bad people, but they were in horrible situations, and they had to make choices that you and I have never had to make. And I just looked at him, and I knew. And it was about a month later, he said, he had a staff meeting, and he said, we're closing. And we told the media it was money, it was COVID, and those are all true, but it was really having his heart broken again and again. Because when you love dogs and when you have a mission to save lives and you can't do it effectively anymore, then you just can't do it. So those are not happy memories, and I do have fun memories, although I didn't work with the dogs a lot. But I think that those are 2 memories that I want your listeners to go away with, to knowing you have the power to do something like a food pantry, whether it's for people, whether it's for dogs. You know, you can take what's bad and create something good, and to not be so judgmental when people have to give away their dogs. Because I hear so many bad statements. Anybody who lets their senior dog at a shelter is the most despicable, horrible human being, and they don't deserve to live. That isn't true always. Sometimes it is. But I've learned you have to hear the real story and have compassion and understand and see, where do you fit into people's lives, making a difference for them and ultimately for their dogs, the kids, and for our world. So, yeah.
Yeah, and being kind and not just seeing what meets the eye. You know, you don't know a person's story when they may have had a bad day and they don't smile back at you. Or I completely understand. Kind of want to circle back or take a little trip down memory lane for you. How has your experience of being one of 8 kids raised in a 2-bedroom home influenced your approach to kindness, family, community? What was life like for you, and what impact has that left in your own life?
I had the best parents. Now, they were not the perfect parents, and my parents' marriage ended in divorce. I did not know that my father, none of us knew he was bipolar. I didn't really know that I probably got beat more than I just thought I was mouthy, which I probably was, and all those things. But they were genuinely good human beings, and they loved us. They gave us music. I don't know if you know this, but I sing. I started off college as a vocal music major. They gave us the arts. They gave us a passionate love of reading. My mother was born in Topeka, Kansas, and in the same house where I was born, where her mother was born. My mother identified as African American, although she was very, very fair. My dad was from New Orleans. And so he was not fair, but he was Creole, which, he had a superiority complex. And it was interesting for him living in the Midwest. But we got so many amazing experiences that other kids didn't have. And I love that my mother and father, particularly my mother, she used to always say, be the best person you can be, and then help others be their best selves. That was like our family mantra. And that is something that has helped me learn to be a kind person, to kind of look behind the story that you see. It was also a really loud house. Everybody sang or played an instrument, and we were noisy and loud, but it was, overall, it was a really fun childhood. Not perfect by any means, as you can imagine, with that many people crammed in. But I guess I'd been in college about 2 years, and my mother started taking in foster kids. And so I never had foster brothers and sisters, but my younger sister and my youngest brothers did. And my mother chose to take those kids who had been through the criminal justice system. They were always like 15, 16, 17-year-old boys. They were always African American, and she took 3 at a time, which Saint Barbara, right? I don't know how she did this. And she just changed so many lives. So even as a young adult, I could see my mom modeling the behavior that she wanted all of us to model, because that's what she did. And she passed away 8 years ago. And I went to Houston, where she had moved with my sisters, and I went to the funeral. It was a large funeral because I have these 3 sisters and a big family and hundreds of people. But I noticed there were all these African American men and some small kids that I didn't know. And of course, I don't live in Houston, so I'm sure some of them were those people, but they just seemed to be not from there. And as I looked, there were just so many young men and middle-aged men and little kids that had flown or driven from all over the country to say goodbye to Mama Barbara, their mother. Whether they were there for 6 months or 2 years or whatever it was, they changed their lives. Now, not everybody was a success. Some people did end up going to prison, and some people she lost contact with, but there were a significant number of people. And I remember this man that was probably at the time maybe 55 or 50, whatever, with a little boy. The little boy had a 3-piece suit. They're all dressed up in the Sunday go to meeting, and it was an open casket. And he held his grandson's hand, and he said, "Now I need you to say goodbye to your Grandma Barbara. If it wasn't for Grandma Barbara, I wouldn't be here. She changed my life, and you wouldn't be here." And he lifted that little boy over the casket and said, "You need to kiss her, thank you." And the little boy did. And I'm like, "Whoa." But there were just so many stories like that at her funeral, people that I didn't know or I didn't know well, that all would stand up and talk about what she did in her life. And she was about 5'2", 5'1", about not even 100 pounds. She was a force, an absolute force. But having somebody who would always give, even if we didn't have enough, there was always room at the table for one more plate. There was always, would you buy my world's finest chocolate so we can send our kid to band camp? Yes, we will. Didn't have the money for the chocolate, didn't need the chocolate, but the answer was always yes. So being raised in a family where you're always going to do for someone else helps you to become a better human being. It isn't about the stuff you own, the spacious home, the privilege you have. I look at my life and I am so much more privileged than the people who were supposed to be privileged because of the parents I had and experiences I had.
What a powerful, powerful impact. I mean, that's I got goosebumps, the funeral story. It's just, knowing that that person that you loved so very much had such a meaningful long-term impact on the lives of so many people. It's a beautiful thing to just capture. I can picture that in my mind. That's
which is still going on. Now, the flip side is, how do you parent 8 kids and be fair? And so there were times when I didn't think I necessarily got treated fairly. And one of them was my college graduation. So I have a sister who's 4 years younger, which means she was graduating from high school. And we were in 2 different cities. And my mom was a working mom and had limited time. I sang in every concert. I was in show choir and madrigals and, select choir. I was in every musical, every play. My mother never saw me perform because she worked nights. And I was not happy that she didn't come. Now, my dad was always there, but not my mom. So you would have thought, college graduation, wow. But she said, I can't come because I'll be at Patricia's. I said, Mom, she's in high school. She has another chance. This is it. She said, You don't know that. I said, Yeah, I kind of think I do because we're all college bound. She says, You're stronger. You don't need me like she does. Well, Patricia not only graduated from college, but from nursing school. Mom was there for all of those. But you know what? Now, as a parent, I know she was right. You do not treat your kids equally. You treat them fairly based on what their needs are, based on you being a mother knowing more about what your child probably needs than the child. I know what my dog needs than more than my dog does, right? If I gave my dog everything he thought he needed, he would die from eating all the cheese I just shredded today.
but I can relate to that story on so many levels because so I have an older brother and a younger brother. And when I was a little kid, it always felt like my parents were favoring my younger brother.
Yep.
And there was a lot of resentment that built up over during that time because I felt it was unfair. Come to find out later on that my brother just needed them more.
Right.
I didn't need as much attention, as much support as my brother did, and my parents knew it. It would have been nice if they had expressed it, but looking back, I now understand it. And being a parent, I now understand it. At the
Right. And
time that didn't, them explaining probably wouldn't have helped at the time anyway, but it's very interesting how the perspective shifts the older you get and how
right.
I'm sure you parent your kids in a very similar way without even noticing it.
Oh, I know I do, and I'm so well, going back to my sister, now I realize my sister didn't ask to have dozens of foster brothers. She probably did need my mom to make her feel special because she didn't ask for that. And all of a sudden, she goes from getting rid of her older siblings and having room to breathe, and then, "No, you don't have room to breathe because there's 2 more kids." That's wow. So one of the regrets that I have in my life is that I did not capture all my mom's stories. I did not capture a lot of stuff. But there is a book that I really would love to write one of these days. And I would love to write a book about parenting. Not that I'm the world's best parent, but I'd like to write it. What did mama do? How did that affect all of us kids? We have one brother who passed away at 36, but there's still 7. So how are we parenting our kids based on what our mom did? And I would really love to focus it for teenagers. What did mom do on drinking, on driving, on jobs, those pivotal parts of being a teen that shape you into the person you are? Because mom did not, now I know, treat any of us alike, but she gave us what we needed. And
Very true.
I think that would be a really interesting parenting book because then we get to look at, I don't know, I have one brother who has 4 kids, one has 5 kids, I have 2 kids. So we're talking a lot of statistics, a lot of grandkids, and now great caring kids that we're going to see. What's interesting is we grew up in a very ghetto neighborhood, very, very poor, but all 8 of us graduated from college, which is something to be said for a single family, minority family in the 60s and 70s. That's just unheard of. And I don't ever go back now because so many people from my neighborhood that were friends, they're either dead or they're in prison.
Mm.
I just don't have those happy memories as a young adult. partly because I didn't live there, but partly because there's just too many things that went wrong in that neighborhood. But they didn't to our family. And so that was the strength and the character of and the love.
One thing that people tend to use as an escape is something you mentioned earlier was reading. You read a lot when you were younger.
Yes.
Another thing is traveling. Now, your life has not been stagnant by no means.
No.
You made traveling a passion that truly impacted your life and I might add the life of your kids as well. Can you share some stories about your travels? And I know there's one story about your son's travels that you would like to share with us as well.
Yes. So, growing up in that little tiny house, as I mentioned, it was noisy. And we had a library that was not far. And I would walk there and I would read on the way home. And I would carry books on my head on the way home. And everybody knew who I was. But I always wanted to travel and we didn't have money. And I went to parochial schools, which meant I was the only minority usually, and the people had money and they would take family vacations and we didn't go anywhere. And I hated that. And I felt like it just wasn't fair that I didn't get to travel. But I realized I can travel and I can travel through books. I can travel backwards in time. I can travel forward in time. I can travel anywhere I want in the country. And I remember in fourth grade, we did this concert and we all learned a song called Faraway Places. And that's a really ancient song from the 30s and 40s. But the chorus talks about faraway places far over the, I don't know if I can say it without singing, over the sea. Let me see. Faraway places with strange sounding names are calling me. And I remember in that concert, as I sang about those faraway places, maybe it's Thailand or maybe it's this. And it was just this silly song. But I owned that song and I said, that's me. I'm going to travel to faraway places. So I read and read and read. And then in eighth grade, with this background of reading and knowledge of geography and travel, there was a alumnus of our school. And by then I was in the public school. And she came and gave her story about being in the Peace Corps in Niger, in Africa. And now I look back, she wasn't a very good speaker. She wasn't engaging. She wasn't special, but she was there just for me because her message of living in a different country and teaching, I want to do that. And so I went to the school counselor and I said, I want to do that. What do I need to do? And she said, well, you should probably take a foreign language. I can do that. And I started taking French. None of my friends took a foreign language because it wasn't mandatory. What else do I need to do? Well, you should probably go to college. I can do that. And I focused on AP courses and getting to college because I knew it would have to be a scholarship. We didn't have money. What else should I do? Well, you might want to be an exchange student. And I applied and I got a full scholarship to be an AFS student I ended up in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And that woman impacted my life in ways she will never know. And that goal, I was telling you earlier, that was my bucket list. We think of bucket list. Oh, my life is, I want to do a hot air balloon. I want to see the Grand Canyon. I want to, whatever. My bucket list, the only bucket list I've ever had was I want to join the Peace Corps. And I went to college specifically to get that piece of paper so I could apply. And I was accepted to the Peace Corps and I went to Mali, West Africa. I didn't live too far from Timbuktu and I taught English as a foreign language. I had no running water. I had no functioning toilet. I had no refrigerator. I had no electricity. I mean, it was really hardcore. And I did that for 2 years and it just added another layer to my life that made me way more compassionate. When I was a freshman at college, I had been a vocal music major, but then I developed a goiter, which American teenagers do not get, but I did. And I ended up having to have my thyroid and parathyroid removed. And I lost my scholarship because I couldn't sing for a year. And everything had been wrapped up in my music and travel. But I got there and I saw so many people with goiter. And my boyfriend that I met there that I later married, he had polio. And we saw so many people. And honestly, had we been either one of us living not in America or a Western country at least, we both would have died for sure. And so it was amazing to be in a country that had so many needs, that was just poorer than poorer than poor. There are no natural resources in the country of Mali, not one. The only natural resources are people. That's it. And that was, but I've never been in a country, in any place that has so much laughter, so much joy, so much caring, so much kindness. And they don't sound like they should go together, but they do.
Let
And
me jump
that
in and
was
ask you this because that's an
Mhm.
interesting one. You often hear that people from these remote places where there's nothing that we as people in the West attribute any value to. How is it that those people who, in our eyes, often have nothing are so genuinely happy in their own lives?
because we don't need the things we don't have. Number one, we didn't have television there. We didn't have movies there. I mean, sometimes they would bring in a projector. I mean, they didn't see all the different things that were possible. Family, family, family. Now, do I want the kind of family they had? No, it's a Muslim country. Men can have 4 wives. So there were a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of hard work. But you and I both know that at the end of the day, what matters most to you is your family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
If you had to walk to work, if you never got to buy a, a pair, you only had one pair of shoes, if you only could eat one meal a day, but you had the love of your family and you had community that would help you and reach out, which would you prefer? Well,
Family.
duh,
Yeah.
your family and community. So I think in these countries where people have less than we can even imagine, they also have more because they do have the close knit families. We in our country, and I think in other countries, I mean, I have 7 brothers and sisters, 6 that are living, and none of them live anywhere near me. I don't get to see my family. I have 3 sisters in Houston, so I'll go there maybe once a year. I've not seen either of my brothers since 2017 at a family reunion. That's not great. But when you live in a country where you don't have anything or very much, you have family or you have community. And I think that's really what brings you that joy, is knowing you are loved and knowing that there's always someone to love you. And so you can be generous with your love. You can be generous with your belongings because you know you're loved. And I think that not everybody knows they're loved here and in other places in the world. They don't know they're loved.
And two people you love very much are, of course, your two boys who went to the Czech Republic and something really interesting happened.
So this is a really it's a parenting story, how to, raising your kids so when they do get in bad situations, they can figure it out. So my older son was an exchange student to the Czech Republic when he was in high school. And when he came back in September, and for Christmas, he and his brother wanted to go visit his host family in Czech Republic. So their dad worked for United Airlines, which means they had benefits, and so the tickets were free or almost. So I said, yes, they can do that. And they each had passports because of the travel that we did. And so they got their little monies, and Justin was 15 at the time. Nicholas had just turned 17. So I don't know a lot of moms who would let their 15 and 17-year-olds hop on a plane by themselves and go to Europe. Because at least when Nick went the first time, he was with a group and he was going to a family. But this time I just said, okay, bye, Dan. And all my friends were like, what? You let them travel? I go, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. So off they went. Justin had worked at Kmart part-time. And so he had, some money. And Nick had a little money from his job. And they were gone for, I don't know, maybe 10 days or something. And so I didn't hear the story until it was over. So they went to the Czech Republic, but they also went to Germany. And so they were in, I think it was Munich they were in, and they went to a beer house, where the big long tables and the umpapa, and the drinking and the
Ah,
pretzel.
Probably the Hofbräuhaus.
Yeah, and it was very popular. And so Justin had a friend in where we lived who said, "Would you buy me one of those big Ricola pipes? Ricola, the Meerschaum pipe, whatever." So Justin said, "Yeah, give me the money." So he goes and buys this carved pipe or whatever it was. I don't know if it was, I don't know where he bought it because they went to more than just Germany, but in Czech, but whatever, they bought up this pipe. It was all wrapped up in tissue paper. And so they get to this drinking and pretzel eating establishment, and Justin unwraps the pipe to show it to his brother. And some guy goes, "Wow, that's really cool. Let me see it." And so he goes, "Yeah." And the guy takes it away. He brings it back in short order, and they wrap it back up and put it in the bags, and they come home. So they were flying through Washington, D.C. And so here you are, a 15-year-old, 17-year-old unaccompanied minors coming in from Europe. That doesn't look like you should be flagged for any reason to have your passport looked at, right? So they get in and they ask, do they have something to declare? And as they're going through the bag, they find the pipe. And they take the pipe, and it turned out the total stranger who had looked at the pipe had actually used it to smoke some kind of drugs in it.
Oh.
Yeah. So it had that in the bowl, which of course is a ding, 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 ding. So they confiscated the pipe, but they also fined the 15-year-old, and it was like $500, and he didn't have it. And of course, they've been gone and they've spent all their money, and they only have enough for like a meal or something at the airport. They don't have any credit cards because I'm not a great mom sending them off with a card. I can't believe I did this, but I did it. So of course, I was so proud they solved the problem themselves. And that's what we want for our kids. You want to give them critical thinking skills. We want to give them the freedom to make mistakes, but to fix mistakes and then come back and own the mistakes. So I found out after the fact that Justin asked Nick, can I have money? Can you go to the ATM and get money out? And Nick goes, I don't have enough. I only have X amount. And it was nowhere near $500. So he only had like, I don't know, like $90. It was not very much. So Justin goes to the control guy and he says, "Okay, we have a problem. I don't have the money. My brother doesn't have enough. But when I get back home, I have a paycheck. So I can give you the $90 or whatever it was in cash, and I can sign an IOU. And when I get home, I will get a cashier's check and I will send it to you for the balance. Is that okay?" And the guy said, "Yes."
Wow.
I know, right? So they get home and he goes to pick up his check, and then he takes some more money out of his account, and he by himself went to the bank and he got a cashier's check and he sent it off. And then he said, "Okay, Mom, I have something to tell you." He didn't have to tell me. How would I have ever known, right?
Wasn't this a proud mama moment, though?
It
Yeah.
was. It was such a proud moment. And he was probably waiting for me to yell at him. And I said, "I am so proud of you, but what did we learn from this?" And so we talked about letting a stranger take something of his and whatnot. But yeah, and he was out the money. I don't even know if that was a real guy. I mean, I don't even know that maybe the guy was a bribe, right? I mean,
Could have been.
I don't really know what happened. All I know is I raised a kid who was confident, who was strong, who was responsible, who created a problem, and he figured it out, and he followed it through, and he told me.
I
And so
love it.
that's what travel can do. That's what I mean. Obviously, not the best parent. There are no perfect parents, but I look back and I went, "Wow, that was a pretty cool moment."
And I like what you said about failing because I think that's something that's kind of underestimated. The value of failing is underestimated in our society.
Yep.
We often think that parents need to shield their kids from everything. Like you shield your kid all the time. You helicopter. You just protecting your child is your number one job. When I believe personally, your number one job is to help turn this child into an adult, make that child a responsible adult, and I want my kids to fail. that sounds terribly mean when I say it
No,
out
I'm
loud
the
like
same
that, it
way.
sounds terribly mean, but failure teaches you so much more than if you have somebody who always picks up the pieces for you. You have to learn responsibility. And that's why I love this story. That's such a wonderful moment. And I would see myself in your shoes right there, and I would be so proud. Like, okay, you were facing a situation that for many other kids would have been so overwhelming. And the first instinct would be, okay, I'm going to call my parents. I'm going to use that $20 or whatever, or that $90 to make that phone call, call
Or
my
I'm gonna
parents.
run away and get caught. It
Yeah.
makes it worse.
Yeah.
I know. And that's when we were talking pre-show. I said, this is a story you better remember to ask me because I think your listeners will appreciate that story and maybe even have a story to top it. Though I gotta say, that was pretty hard to top for being a mom that let your kids do that.
Now, Carmen, one thing you do now is you have become a storyteller. You lived your life, you experienced so many amazing things, some of them heartbreaking, some of them beautiful, a lot of them wonderful. All of them combined make your life. What made you become, or what made you want to become a storyteller and share stories and share your experience with the world?
I have always been a storyteller, and my family my husband is from New England. I marry a lot, so when I say my husband, I have to give you a scorecard, so this is husband number 3. So husband number 3 is from New England, and no, true story, but his parents were quiet and very New England and very, um you go to his family, and they're just so quiet. We went to Florida to see his mother one year because she had moved there, and I'm on my computer working, doing whatever I'm doing, and they're in the room and they're playing a game. They're playing mahjong or whatever. There was literally no noise at all. And I went, "Are you guys okay? Did somebody die?" I had never been in a house where 2 people make no sounds. It was. I'm like, "Wow, that is not my house." We are all storytellers, and my husband loves family reunions and weddings and funerals and any opportunity to be around my family because we're all storytellers. So I've always done this. When I became a single mom, well, I'm a salesperson too. That's what I gravitated to was sales and marketing. So the best salespeople are storytellers because they can capture your heart and capture your wallet at the same time. So it's just kind of the way it goes. But when I was married to husband number 2, on our 3rd wedding anniversary, he became diagnosed with a disease called Huntington's disease, which is a genetic disease. We did not know he was at risk. And it's like having Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and paranoid schizophrenia all at once. And obviously, that was very devastating. There were no books written about it from the family perspective. It was basically little snippets in medical journals that ended with, and then you die after all these horrible symptoms. If you had kids, they had a 50% chance of having it. Sadly, his daughter does. And so it was so hard to go from an abusive marriage and then divorce and then reinventing myself and then getting married and this happening. But I decided I would write a book, and I was not a writer. I wrote for a living. I wrote junk mail and TV commercials and marketing material, but I had never thought of writing a book. So I wrote the book that I wish would have existed when I learned this terrible news. And it turned out I was kind of good at it. And I began speaking in England and Ireland and Scotland and Africa and Canada and all over the country. And I it was pretty amazing the doors that opened through the power of story. And then I wrote another book about Huntington's, and then I wrote about grief and about death and about dying. And, so I like to joke that I take all these horrible things that happen in my life and I monetize them. I tell stories and then I earn money. Which, right?
Nothing,
But
nothing wrong with that.
nothing wrong. But really what it is I had to go through this for whatever reason. And if I don't reach out and help somebody in a similar situation, then I went through all of this for nothing. Nothing. So not everybody and not most people will ever write a book. Not most people know how to share their story. I am so transparent. It's probably embarrassing for my kids and my husband, but it's okay because people need to hear stories. We are nothing more than an accumulation of our stories. That's all we are as people. And I always say, whether or not you're a professing Christian or not, or you know, whatever your faith is, Jesus taught in parables, which is not a big word for stories. And we don't remember all the begats, and we don't remember all of the history and the lineage, but we sure remember David and Goliath, and we remember water into wine, right? We remember those, right? We remember the
Absolutely.
stories. Even if that's not our faith, we remember them. If it was good enough to teach through stories for him, it's good enough for me. So that's how I started. And there were like 10 years where I didn't write. I just got busy with life and the car wreck and the brain damage. And when there was such a need for dogs and a need for money to be able to keep saving dogs, I decided, I said I'd never write another book because it's so much work. But if I write a book, I will always have money to donate. So what I do now is that I write rescue dog books. I wrote one in 2022, another one coming out in May. I've got a couple more in this series I'll probably write. And a portion of everything I sell goes to one specific animal rescue because I'm not a wealthy person. I don't have a lot to give, but I think if I can give a little bit. So the cost to rescue a dog from Alabama, to spay neuter it, because most of them are not, to do the shots, to transport them up, is about $100. So even if I only gave $100 a month, I rescued 12 dogs. That's pretty cool, right?
Absolutely.
And in the first year since the book came out, I actually was able to donate $5,000,
Very
which is pretty
nice.
cool. And so I feel like if you've been given an ability, if you know how to work hard, if you have a gift to do something that you can charge money and give some of that away to help others, you should do that. Doesn't mean you always can, but you should. And yeah, I would love to have all that money so I could travel or do other things. But I think it's more important to give.
Where can people find your books? Where can people find out more about you and support your work?
Well, thank you. And that's really not why I'm here. I just love talking to you. You're just so much fun. It's a great interview. So the first book is called I Chose You: Imperfectly Perfect Rescue Dogs and Their Humans. And the number one place to find it is on Amazon.com. And my name is Carmen Leal, and the spelling is Leal. So you pop that in, and it's pretty easy to find. I have a website, carmenleal.com, and I started a little publishing imprint called wagawaypublishing.com. So either one of those websites, but really the easiest one is Amazon. The new book coming out in May is called When Love Wags a Tail. And so what I do in all my books is I think that I'm not that interesting of a person. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting people, and it's very presumptuous of me to write a book about about dogs, when I've only owned one dog. I mean, what have I got to say? I've never had a dog that was shot in the head, or a dog with epilepsy, or I've never had a dog that was abused. I never had any of those dogs, but I know people. So what I do is I interview people, I get their stories, and I weave my stories into their story. So this new book has 40 authors, and I like to say it's like a mini memoir meets chicken soup for the soul. So the stories are short. They're about 1,200, 1,500 words. They're easy to read. You pick it up, pick them down. Every chapter is themed. The last book, I Chose You, the hook is music because I love music. So every chapter is based on a song, but you learn while you're entertained. This new one, I am a reluctant gardener. If you go to my website, you'll see that it says I am a storyteller, coconuts mom, reluctant gardener. So somehow we've managed to create beauty in our yard, and we were on the garden walk last year, which makes me laugh even more for being a dog person. So this one, I weave gardening and plants and the symbolic meaning of plants because there's a lot of similarities. Plants start with seeds, and so do dogs. You got to plant the flower in the right soil. You got to put the dog in the right soil. You got to get them nutrition. You have to train them. There's so many similarities. So I draw all those similarities and tell fun stories of interesting people from all over the country. And yeah, so that's what I do. Then when I get a royalty check, then I shoot it off to a charity called Second Chance North. They're an area rescue, but their parent company is Second Chance Shelter in Boaz, Alabama. And so we bring up dogs, they bring up dogs. I just write checks and do book signings and, try and figure out how to make more money so that those dogs who are rescued can go to their happily ever forever after home, a home they would never have found. There's so much poverty down there. You can adopt a dog there for $60. That's the value of a dog, which is not a lot. Up here is $375. But every penny of that $375 goes back to Alabama. So that allows them to take $375 instead of $60 and bring in more dogs. So it doesn't take a lot to save a life.
Carmen, this was an amazing conversation, riveting. I hope that we can have a follow-up at some point.
I would love that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. You live a long, crappy life. You got a lot to talk about.
Thank you so much for joining me today and
for telling. You're a wonderful host. You're just wonderful.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
As we prepare to bid farewell after this deeply touching episode of ThoughtVolution, I am overwhelmed by the sheer depth of Carmen's journey. A journey marked not only by trials and tribulations, but by profound moments of connection, compassion, and unconditional love. A love that goes beyond the connections we form with our fellow human beings. ThoughtVolutionists, you know how much I care about kindness, and my motto is and remains, make kindness your default. And that motto should also apply to our treatment of animals. Carmen's story is a testament to the limitless capacity of the human heart, a heart that has weathered storms and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more alive than ever before. From the ashes of tragedy arose a new sense of hope in the form of a gentle rescue dog named Coconut. Through the depths of pain and despair, Carmen found true purpose in the eyes of her faithful companion. A companion who, in his silent strength and unconditional love, became her anchor in the tumultuous sea of life. Together they embarked on a journey of healing, redemption, and boundless joy. But Carmen's story is not just about the transformative power of a single bond. It's about the ripple effect of kindness, compassion, and love. And what an inspiration is that! Through her tireless advocacy for rescue dogs, Carmen has touched the lives of thousands, both human and canine alike, offering hope where there was despair, light where there was darkness, and love where there was fear. As we bid farewell to Carmen and Coconut, let us carry forward the lessons they have so generously shared with us today. The lessons of empathy, resilience, and the profound beauty of the human-animal bond. May we always remember that love, companionship, friendship, loyalty are all basic desires we share with our fellow humans as much as we share them with our four-legged friends. I can tell you, based on my own experience, that I personally made it through some of the toughest moments of my life because of the love so unconditionally, generously, and wholeheartedly given to me by Gizmo, my amazing and wonderful 17-year-old Chihuahua, Poppy Luna, my goofy, wild little Shih-Poo, and Aaron and Kano, the sweetest cats in the whole world. That's my biased opinion. Without them, my life would not be what it is, and I owe them so much. Gratitude first and foremost. This is ThoughtVolution, where connections go beyond the capabilities of just the human soul. Join us as we continue to explore the depths of our shared existence, one story at a time. I'll see you next time. I love you lotsies.